Welcome to Moments with Marianne. This is your host, Marianne Pastana, and we're here today with special guest, PMH Atwater, and she's here to share with us her new book, Edgewalker, The Lives and Deaths of PMH Atwater. So Dr. PMH Atwater is an international authority on near-death experiences and spiritual transformations. Different since childhood, she conducted her first double-blind study with a control group at the age of 5. This led to extensive studies in altered states of consciousness and the transformational process, leading her to start Idaho's first nonprofit metaphysical corporation, Inner Forum. So let's welcome to the show, Dr. PMH Atwater.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Wonderful.
Oh my goodness, what an honor it is to have you here and to talk about your brand new book. So what was the inspiration behind writing this book?
A colleague of mine, Kenneth Ring, Dr. Kenneth Ring, said, we know all about your research. I'm a researcher of near-death states and spiritual transformations, that kind of thing, known worldwide. Some of my work is at least mentioned in Lancet Medical Journal. So, I've been very much deeply into research for 44 years. And Ken made it very plain. He said, we know about your research. We don't know about you. And I thought, oh, dear, I'm going to have to write about myself. Do you know it took me 5 years and 5 different versions of the book to write about myself? Was not easy.
It is a very powerful read. And you just, from the beginning, start off about your birth, which is interesting. I'm so glad you put this all into perspective, because back in 1937, women didn't have children out of wedlock. That was like a big no-no. And
that was a crime.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
It was an absolute crime. My mother was in Kansas. She moved to southern Idaho, where I come from, to live with a sister. And that didn't work out at all because the sister's husband kept cussing her out, and saying what a horrible person she was. So she sort of fled to Twin Falls, Idaho, and got a job in a hotel as they had food too, so she was a waitress. That's all she could find. And a little room tucked away in the top floor of someone's house, because you didn't have motels then. Forget it. You didn't have motels. And so after the baby was born, after I was born, within 2 months, she was kicked out of that room. And yes, I was born near midnight. It was actually, it was a little after midnight, and it was one of these things of hush, 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 hush. You didn't talk about it. And I was born less than a mile from the edge of Snake River Canyon, a huge canyon. And I've been a canyon person ever since. I just love canyons, going up and down them, crawling, climbing. So that's, I'm really a canyon person. And Mama Song, SOGN, Norwegians, they were stranded in southern Idaho because of a business deal that went sour. They were in Twin Falls, and Mama Song had a tea with a gypsy fortune teller, and in those days you didn't have tea bags. Nobody thought of a tea bag. So it was real tea in a real cup. And so she read 2 things in the tea leaves. One, Daddy's song, the job he would want and get would come to him when he was outside trimming a hedge. And the second, the daughter they'd always prayed for would come to them in a rainstorm. Well, sure enough, Daddy's song later on was outside trimming a hedge. And the owner of the animal hospital came up to him and said, would you like a job? We would like to employ you. And he did. He went there and worked there until he developed cancer and could work no more. The rainstorm, in those days, you didn't have traffic lights. You had these tall lamp lights. So at least in Twin Falls we did. And it was raining, and my mother was her arms were around a lamp post, and she was crying. And Daddy's song happened to be going by, and he noticed her, went up, and said, "What's the problem?" And Baron, this is World War II, folks. And then he went up and, "What's the problem?" And she said what the problem was. And he said, "Don't worry, we have a spare bedroom, and my wife loves children." So that's how we got to the song Residence. And my crib was kept with the songs, not with my mother. And I did not know my mother was my mother, until I was about 4 or so. I thought Mom and Daddy's song were, my parents, and I thought I was a Norwegian. I mean, I grew up thinking I was a Norwegian. I really did. And I didn't like my mother. First thought, for first blush, I did not like her. She'd hold me or anything, I'd start screaming and crying, trying to get away from her. And I sort of grew up very estranged from my mother, and I lived instead with the songs. And like I said, World War II. But when I was old enough to go to school, first grade, it was a long walk from where I was staying to the school where I would have to go. And on this long walk, it was a walk of death. Because in those days, if anybody died in the war effort, the government sent your family a large gold star decal, and you were to put it in your window, like a living room window, as a sign to everyone that someone in your family had paid the ultimate price. And it was time of Pearl Harbor, and so my walk to school, there were any number of homes that had gold stars in the window. And this one overnight had, I think it was like 4 or 5 new gold stars in the window, and I just stood there and I sobbed, and I sobbed and I sobbed. And by the time I got to school, I just, I couldn't even handle it. And it took me literally, it took me 50 years before I could handle gold at all or wear it. I couldn't wear it till I was in my 70s. That's how that affected me. After that, I did everything I could to make sure I never got a gold star on any test, because a gold star meant death. And I didn't want death on my school papers. Plus, another little thing I dealt with in the first grade. I was the only child who had dyslexia and synesthesia, and hardly anybody ever heard of dyslexia. And synesthesia, nobody ever heard of synesthesia. And that's when you have differences in sensing mechanisms in your brain. In other words, I could smell color, I could see music, and I could talk to numbers. And that was very real to me. It was not, this is not play, this is real. And because of that, my school teacher in the first grade thought I was a terrible, terrible liar. So I had to spend most of the first grade on a tall, conical stool in front of the class, wearing a stool, wearing a tall, conical hat that said dunce on it. And that's how I spent the first grade. And the principal tried twice to get me kicked out of school. My mother would not let him. Thank you, Mother. And so by the end of the first grade, I was so angry. I was just so angry, Marianne. I just don't know how I can tell you how angry I was. And I just decided at the end of first grade that all adults were stupid and I was never going to be one when I grew up. So I was
Oh
one of
boy.
these those spunky kids. But fortunately, after Mother got through with her many husbands, she took me back with the final one, and he was a police officer. And I was more or less raised in a police station because wherever you went in Twin Falls, if I wanted to get home quick, dad and coffee break, I would go to the police station, I would wait, and if he could take me home, he would. So I was very privy to interrogations. In those days, they had real key locks. The big ones, the big key lock. And so you could see through that lock and you could hear through that lock. And I'd walk by the interrogation room and I'd put my eyeball up to that, key lock and my ear, and I'd watch and I'd hear. And invariably, the person inside who'd been roughed up or nearly killed or in an accident or whatever would tell the interrogation officer, I just knew if I went with that person, something bad would happen. Or they would say, I just knew if I opened that door, something bad would happen. And me being a little kid listening on the other side would say, well, if you just knew, why did you do it? And I just decided all adults were stupid. I mean, they didn't listen. So I became one who was very much a part of both worlds, because both worlds were real. The world of what you can touch and walk on and skip rope on, plus the other world of the mind and beyond. That world was just as real as the one I could touch and feel. So I grew up, just convinced all these worlds were real. And what made it even realer for me was Mom and Dad moved to an acreage outside of Twin Falls, south of Twin Falls, on Rock Creek Canyon. And so I'm out here now in the fields. They had about 50 acres. It wasn't a big place, Dad obviously couldn't till it in any way, but they could raise milk cows, and they could raise some cattle. So I was up in the high pasture, sitting on a log. It was like a bright Saturday, and I was all by myself, just gazing. And all of a sudden, this is going to sound really wild to your audience, but hey, I got to be honest. All of a sudden, there was this energy, and I could see it, and it would rise from the earth like a mountain builds. It looked exactly like a see-through, transparent mountain rising from the earth. And these were the spirit keepers. And the spirit keepers, it was their job to hold all of the earth together. Didn't matter where you were, whether you were in the New York City or whether you're out in the wilds like I was. Didn't matter where you were. Always there are spirit keepers, because it's their job to hold the earth together. And so I got acquainted with the spirit keepers, and they helped me to get through what I was going through. Because at that time in my life, what was I? Sixth grade, seventh grade, right in there somewhere. Maybe the fifth grade. Or even before then, when my mother took me. She would cuss me out at least 3 times a week, maybe 4. So I was raised with that. No matter what I did, it was not perfect enough, and she would cuss me out or curse me. So there was this horrible horrible words that were flowing from her mouth. And it was just really rough. And those spirit keepers enabled me to handle that and to sort of forgive her and walk on. And lots of issues with school after that, and sort of growing up until I was finally able to turn things around again. And that was because of Mama's song. She took an interest in what was going on and did everything she could to help me. And that made a huge difference.
I just love in your book how you talk about the spirit keepers. And I know so many people that listen can either see spirit or have had something spiritual happen in their lives where it really can't be denied if they see it or not. But to have that as a young child, I mean, what a gift that is.
Well, I don't know gift. What I know is reality. And they taught me what the world is and how it works. And that enabled me to live through it. It's sort of like first aid for the soul.
Oh, wow. Like that guidance that I know many of us never get as we grow up, so.
Well,
that's-
I was one of these spunky, strange kids because at the age of 5, I did my first double-blind study with a control group. I just had to find out what the earth is. I had to find out why things exist and what they really are. So I was always researching. So they helped me very much in that capacity to keep going and realize that, hey, this is an okay place. Once you figure out how to live here, it's not a bad place to live.
Well, and it's interesting how you went from a place of having difficulty in school to really kind of having it be what you call your mecca in your.
Oh yeah, it really became that. I went through a lot of periods of shoplifting and all this kind of stuff before that was all turned around by Mama's song, by the way. And she cured my shoplifting by finding out I was doing it, number one. And number two, the horror that my father was a police officer and he could lose his job over this. And she had my parents bring me to her on a Saturday morning. I'll never forget it. I was seated on the sofa on the far end of the living room, and in the middle was the door, and behind the door was Mama Song's desk that sort of jutted out. So you close the door, and there's this desk. And Mama Song was reading from her Bible. She had one of these big Bibles. I mean, the thing was massive. She read it every day of her life, and so did Daddy's song. Well, anyway, she pointed to something in the Bible and started crying. That woman never said a word. All she did was cry. Well, I loved her so much that I just, what? What did I do to upset Mama Song? So I tiptoed over there and, looked over her shoulder, and the 10 Commandments and thou shalt not steal. Oh, I got it. I got the whole message, and I was crying with her. And between her and I, we took everything I stole back to the stores. We did. And we looked around and, make sure we weren't seen. We'd sneak here, sneak there. And we returned everything to the shelves that I had taken out. And then we left. And that was the last of that kind of stuff. For me, it's like, oh, gee, I'm not going to do anything like this. I mean, the Bible says you can't do that. And it upset Mama's song. So I, never did that again.
She was such a powerful force in your life and
Oh,
such a
wow.
positive force. Oh my goodness, what a great person to have there.
Well, finally, when I'm, grown and I'm a near-death researcher and going around the world to give, talks and attend conferences and all this kind of stuff, I went 3 times to Norway, and one time I was taken to the Sognefjord, which is where their people are from, and got to the Sognefjord, and I thought, well, I'm good. I'm going there to honor Mom and Daddy's song and, their family, the Song family. And I'm standing there at the fjord, right across from Balestrand. So I'm standing there at the ford, and I'll tell you, if you can't appreciate bigness, go to a fjord, and especially the Sognefjord, because it's the largest in Norway, and it is so big. Well, anyway, I'm standing there at the edge of the water, and I'm crying and I'm crying and I'm crying, and I'm realizing, nope, nope, I'm not there for Mom and Daddy's song. I'm there for me. And my past life in Norway came full bore. I get to see it all, feel it all, and do some of the things I had done when I lived there. And it was in that life that my consciousness was turned around by Father Olaf. The idea of the Bible, the idea of, the Ten Commandments and all this kind of stuff, I had a vision in that life of the truth of what life really is and why we're here. And that I was to find Father Olaf. I was to find Olaf. I called him Father because I considered him my father. I did find him. And I joined. I joined Olaf's crew, and we were part of the force, certainly a large force of the group, the energy that brought Christianity to Norway, and died. And at the big battle, it was sort of like the Civil War here, and died at this battle at Stiklestad. And Father Olaf was over a hill where I was when he was killed. I was on a little bit of a hill. In this life, that little bit of hill is someone's driveway to a farmhouse, and I found where I was stabbed and died. It's right where they park a tractor today. So I took pictures of it. It was just so real. And I could remember being struck with that knife and cut open and saying to myself, this is a good way to die. This is a good way to die. I am dying for my country. Yeah, you can just imagine that big, bulky Norwegian guy. Well, who I was then. But, that made such a difference in the lives that followed, certainly the life I have now, and have Norwegians that raised me. And you look at all these little ties. I wish everyone could in some way find all the little ins and outs of why they are the way they are today, because it is no accident. And to be able then to put that together, or at least find a way to follow those feelings and to be able to understand them, to profit from them, and to turn your own life around in such a way that you have accomplishment and you have this feeling of, yes, I solved that problem, or I learned from that, and how important that is.
That's just so powerful. And you talked about bringing, I don't know if it's talents or gifts from that time period. What did you mean by that? Was it like knowledge that you brought back with you?
Well, yes, knowledge, but for me in that particular lifetime, it was the presence of God, the absolute presence of God, and the absolute knowing that there is a God, number one, and that I can be a part of helping others to uplift their lives and build a better life. Because in knowing that you are a part of God, or if you don't want to call it God, you're a part of that greater reality, that you can improve the life you have now and build from that. And boy, to me, that's valuable. I don't have to go around thinking, well, hey, I was once a Norwegian. That's long gone. Right now, I'm PMH Atwater, and I like the life I have. It was kind of klutzy to begin with, and frightening and all this kind of stuff. And I went through a lot of, horrific things, especially in just trying to be a researcher. I mean, I didn't have a PhD. I didn't have an MD, but by golly, I got some of my work recognized and put in Lancet Medical Journal. So yeah, move over, guys. My research base is nearly 5,000 adults and children, near-death experiencers. Written 18 books on that. My 19th book, of course, is my memoir autobiography. But I'm a real solid researcher, and I can tell you all about my research. But you can read the book, like the big book of near-death experiences. That's almost like an encyclopedia, only a fun one because I put in a lot of jokes. And then near-death experiences is the rest of the story. And you really need to read that to get an idea of the other side and what you keep seeing in the written word and everybody's books and everything. There's another side. And there's other sides. When you're talking about unconditional love, for instance, whoa, that's a big one. But it can also be frightening to your family. It can be frightening to anybody that knows you. It doesn't come across necessarily as we think it would. And so, there's other sides to everything. And especially if you're researching children, which I've done a lot of, please get my book, The Forever Angels, Near-Death Experiences in Childhood and Their Lifelong Impact. You get a child between birth and the age of 5 who has a near-death experience. And you're talking about something that's, whoa, you better pay attention here because they're not like any other near-death experiencer. No, they're not. They're very different because they have no before, you see. There's no way they can compare anything to anything before. What they come in with is that stream, that river of consciousness where they once were. So these are very different children. We're talking 397 child experiencers. And so with that many, you have to, you just simply have to stop and look at this. Most of them could remember their birth and tell you all about it. And they come back so intelligent. Why are they so intelligent? They are. It's nothing for these kids to start abstracting at the age of 4. Most people don't know how to abstract till the age of 20. Um, Many of them have library cards by the time they're 5, reading the Wall Street Journal. I mean, I'm on a particular tact right now, certainly within the next couple of months, where I want to interest MDs and those people who research the brain and say, we're talking about a lot of people. Here's what I keep finding. Why? Why a near-death experience when you're very, very young that, turn you around in a very definitive way? It changes brain function. It changes the nervous system. It changes the bowels. There are definitive changes that are happening here. So just read the book, The Forever Angels. And we really need to do more research about children, and especially the little ones.
I know Jacob Cooper is one gentleman that I know. He's kind of a friend of mine, and he has memories going back to birth, which is really interesting that some people have this type of memory that they can pull on.
Absolutely.
And then remembering his near-death experience and
Mhm.
coming back. So there's lots of information to be gained by that. I want to kind of toggle over to this real quick. I understand you had a lot of police cars chasing you in Twin Falls, Idaho.
Yes. When I married the first time, remember my dad's a cop, and when I first married, when I married my husband and I, new husband, quickly changed clothes after the wedding, got in a car and zoomed out to the airport. And out on the tarmac, we got out of the car, ran to a plane. My husband was a member of a flying club, so we jumped in the plane and took off just as a whole squad of police cars were surrounding the car we came in with and honking, and went down to Elkton and then down to Southern California. Had my dad, as it were, wanted to quote unquote kidnap us and put us in jail as a joke. He had a great sense of humor. And
He did.
yes, well, we made it out of town. We foxed him. We outfoxed that man.
Do you mind sharing with us how you became a near-death researcher?
I had undergone a divorce and sort of wondering what am I going to do with my life. And before that, maybe we need to do a little before here, for a number of years. I had started Idaho's first nonprofit metaphysical corporation by the name of Inner Forum. Because there were so many people, thousands of people, who became interested at that time in the 60s with, reincarnation and all of these ghosts and all these spooky kind of things. And I wanted good information out there rather than just dime store pocketbooks. So I started Inner Forum, and with a lot of help from the other side, but I started Inner Forum. And it just really went really, really well. I mean, easily over 3,000 people year after year. I mean, we did a lot with Inner Forum in Boise, Idaho, and some of their, I know in the big newspaper, I would imagine back in their files you could find that. And after years of this, I decided enough's enough, and it was time for me to pull out. So I had a nice board by then, and the board of directors took over and ran Interform. And I decided, what do you do with your life now? And I decided I would become a bank manager. I had had enough of this kind of stuff. I'm going to become a bank manager. So I was enrolled in banking classes. And this one particular night, I opened my home weekly on a weekly basis, once a week, for those people who wanted to just come to my place and talk about metaphysics and talk about reincarnation and talk about all these things and just talk to each other. And we did that. And this one particular night, this one fellow, he'd flown up from California. He was doing some work in Idaho. He was very anxious to show everybody this new way he had discovered of making tea. And so I thought, okay, okay, and set aside time for him at the meeting. He never came. Hours went by, never came. So I went to bed because I was facing a test the next day in drafting. I was in the mathematics department at Boise State University, and I was going to have a drafting test. And so I went to bed early because I had to prepare for my first college exam. I mean, wow, me in college, that was a biggie. And especially in the mathematics department, I was in my own kind of little heaven. And it was way after midnight. I don't know what time it was. My oldest daughter was still home. I have 3 children. The boy was gone. He was firstborn, and then the 2 girls were still home. And she went to the door, and this guy was pounding on the door and wanted to come in. And so she woke me up, and she said, what do we do with this fellow? And so I sort of woke up and could see by his aura, just looking at his aura, everything was bursting out all over everywhere. I mean, there was no way you could talk to the guy and make any sense out of it. So I said I had some empty bedrooms. Go in that bedroom, go to sleep. We'll talk about it in the morning. That'll be fine. Please leave me alone. I've got to go to bed. So he went to bed and shut his door, and I went to bed and shut my door. And sometime during the night, he came to my bedroom, just came in and raped me. Well, I couldn't handle that because, I wasn't really awake or asleep or anything, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And he just had his way with my body and then left. And I became pregnant because of that.
I am so sorry that happened.
Well, who's to say sorry? Because we can't judge things. Because it was because of that I became a researcher. It was because of that that all kinds of things happened. Because I miscarried, and it became very, very serious. That was in late 1976. And I died the first time, January 2nd, 1977, from problems with a miscarriage. Died again 2 days later, January 4, and again March 29. And then later that fall, to October, September, November, I had 3 major relapses. So 1977 wasn't my year. I had to relearn how to crawl, how to stand, how to walk, how to tell the difference between left and right, how to see properly, hear properly, and rebuild all of my belief systems. So, uh, yeah, it was a college graduate course and then some. And then that fall, everything fell apart, and sort of had to do it all again. But one of the interesting things that your readers might find, and you as well, is during this time of absolute desperation. So we're talking after death 3 and 4, and the near-death experience I had also. I died, physically died, but I also had very, very active and broad and big near-death experiences with all 3. And afterward, I just, it was just so hard to make any sense out of it. So some friends of mine gave me 2 books. One was called Dune by Frank Herbert. The other one was called The Lord of the Rings, certainly by that master of all masters, who wrote The Lord of the Rings. And as I read those books, this might sound fantastical to you, but it's exactly what happened. I became each of the people in both books. Good, bad, didn't matter. And I lived through what they lived through, and I became them. And in doing that, I learned a litany. Now, you get some of this in Dune. And why I changed it from what's in Dune, I don't know. But here it goes. And I hope everybody listens, because this is for everybody. Fear is the mind killer. It is the little death. I will face my fear. It will go around me and through me, and when it is gone, I will remain. That litany enabled me to go through all of this.
That is so powerful to have that belief, but also that knowing, and to make sense of it in that way. Wow.
Well, then the final thing that year, it was in early November, I don't know, 6th, 7th, something like that. Friends found out that in Seattle, Washington, they were having the Mind Miraculous Symposium at Seattle Center in downtown Seattle. And of course, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross would be there, and all the biggies. And my doctor said I could go. So my friends got a little kind of van and tucked me in as a little kid on the floor, and blankets. And we stopped at the doctor, and he gave me a shot and some medication, because he felt that it would be good that I go. So I went to the Mind Miraculous Symposium. And what I remember is walking in, I have an aisle seat on the left, and Dr. William Tiller is giving this talk on the eternal now. And he felt that all things happen at the same place at the same time. And he could prove this through physics. So he flashed onto this giant screen. I mean, it had to have been several floors high, but a giant screen. His rendition, mathematically, of what he thought the eternal now actually was. And it was exactly what I saw and experienced in my 3rd near-death experience. And I got up from my chair, and I left the auditorium. I collapsed under a wall sconce in the hallway, And I cried and I cried and I cried. I'm not crazy. I'm not crazy. He saw it too. I'm not crazy. And from that moment on, I started getting well.
Is that what they mean by what you mean by the title Edgewalker? Because it seems like in many ways in your life, you are on the edge of a
Yeah,
new
always.
transformation, you know?
Ever since I was born.
But
Yeah, it's an honest name.
well, in the way that I mean, like, you're bringing this new information forward when back then a whole lot, people weren't really talking about this. So it's like you were one of the founding people to help bring these discussions forward.
Well, I lived them. I had to deal with them. And oh yeah, I didn't tell you in my third near-death experience, one that happened in March. I heard what I call the voice like none other. And it spoke to me. And it said, test revelation. You are to do the research. One book for each death. Book number 1 was not named. Book 2 and 3 were named. I really think book number 1 was coming back to life because that was my first major book, but that wasn't named. Book 2 and 3 were. Book 2 is Future Memory. And I would implore everyone to get a hold of Future Memory because it's not a book. It is a labyrinth. And it was that voice that showed me how to write the labyrinth. It is a real labyrinth. It's not a book, it's a labyrinth. So when you start reading, you stay on the path. You don't ever get off the path. You don't ever skip read. Because if you do, you'll miss the labyrinth effect. And it is designed to help everyone come up to the next highest level possible for them consciously at that point in their lives. So it's a brain changer. It's an uplifter. And the third one was a manual for developing humans. Most of us don't seem to realize that maybe 1,000 years ago or so, the word for God was hue. It was a sound, hue, H-U, hue. So human, God, was God man, God woman. So it's a manual for developing humans. That is to say, it takes you literally almost from birth on, and shows you how to talk, how to live in easy, fun ways. I mean, the thing is full of fun, and A to Z, and where we're going, and what's it all about, Alfie? So if you, who's instructed in first or second or third grade how to be a human? Well, you get everything else, but you don't get that one, and that's the biggie: how to talk, how to think. And
I think I missed that day.
Well, get that book. Plus, it also has thought form drawings in it, which I made. And so I think you'll enjoy the drawings also. But I would encourage everyone to get Future Memory and a manual for developing humans, because those are specific, and those were written up basically in the same way that I was told to do. So because of that voice way back then, I spent over 44 years researching near-death experiences. I didn't have the money to do this. Nobody told me how to do it, ever. I just went out and did it. One thing led to another, which led to another, which led to another. And what paid for a lot of what I did was runestone castings using goddess runes. No, it's not like any other rune set out there at all, anywhere, any country. Nope, not out there. It was given to me, and I developed it further. I've written several books on it myself. And I hope a publisher comes forward and says, I'd like to keep this out there for people. I'd love to, because it's very pictorial and everything, shows you how to do it. But God, I would cast runes for people, and the money I made for that paid for my research, literally. So, sorry, folks, that it's borrow a lot of money. I earned mine, and that's how I did my research.
In your book, you say, and I was just so struck by this quote you have in your book, and it's your quote: all life begins in darkness. Everything that exists came from darkness. I mean, my goodness, what a great reminder that is, that no matter what we're going through, we're in this process of becoming something.
Well, that's also scientific fact. They've been able to our wonderful scientists have been able to find that that's absolutely true. All life begins in darkness. Absolutely everything. And all death ends in light. Don't you love it? Don't you love it?
I love that. Oh, my goodness.
Yep.
Oh, my goodness.
All life begins in darkness. All death ends in light. That's a scientific fact, and the science is in the book. And references.
Well, PMH, where can our listeners connect with you and be part of your community and learn more about your work?
Well, certainly get the book from Amazon. Do it right now. And that'll help build numbers and get the book out to more people quicker. So I'm depending on everybody to help get this book out, because it really needs to be out there. I have a website, www.pmhatwater.com. So you can get a lot just going to my website. Also, I produce a free monthly newsletter, and I call it Only for the Curious. So if you're curious, you just might like my newsletter. And so you get on my you get on my website, www.pmhatwater.com. Then you go over to newsletter, and you sign. It's free. You can sign up there. There's also an archive, so you can get into the archive, go back to several issues. You can go back many years if you want to, and see whether or not you want it. Because you have an opportunity then to find out. But I do publish this free newsletter, so you can get it that way. I do have a Facebook, but bear in mind, I have electrical sensitivity. 60% in my research, and really in most other people's research, 60% of most near-death experiencers return with electrical sensitivity. I happen to have a bigger case than most of them do, but that's one of the after effects. So, so I don't have a normal Facebook because I can't handle the energy. So you can go there to find out things. There's a lot there, but you can't go there to talk to me. You can leave a comment. And my webmaster secretary can get that comment and give it to me, or I say, hey, my email, just get over to my email anyway. But that's in the book, so everything they need is in the book. What I recommend to everybody is join up with the International Association of Near-Death Studies, which is IANDS, IANDS, IANDS. I'm a member too, have been since they started. Powerful organization. And they will help you more than anyone else can or will. So you go to their website, have a lot of stuff there, a lot of material that's just fantastic. Their big international meeting this year will be held in Arlington, Virginia, which is close to where I live, and that starts on August 30, I believe, and concludes on September 3. I speak there. I speak at 12 noon on Sunday, September 3. So you might go there just to meet me and my husband. Yes, I have remarried long ago. We've been married now. We married in 1980, and I can honestly say the marriage gets better every year. I mean, it does. He's my angel. He's the angel God gave me. Absolutely.
Well, PMH, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show with us here today.
Well, thank you for having me.
Well, thank you, PMH. It's been such an honor to spend this time with you and to talk about your new book, Edgewater. Edgewater's available at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all indie retailers. And if you don't see it on the shelf, just ask for them to order it. And remember, support our indie bookstores. On that note, we're going to pause here for a quick moment, and we'll be right back after this message. I'd like to thank Jason Eastwood at Guitarfulness for sharing his inspiring music and talent with us. His music is known worldwide for cultivating atmospheres of harmony, inner peace, and clarity. Visit Jason's website at guitarfulness.com. Join his newsletter, be part of his community, and download his music. Well, we're at the end of our time today. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in. You've been listening to Moments with Marianne, where we make every moment count.
In a single moment, your life can change. Moments with Marianne is a transformative hour that covers an endless array of topics with the best of the best. Her guests are leaders in their fields, ranging from inspirational authors, top industry leaders, and business and spiritual entrepreneurs. Each guest is gifted and a true visionary. A recognized leader in her own work, and while teaching others to develop, refocus, and grow, Marianne will bring the best guest and sometimes a special surprise. Don't miss this. You never know just which moment will change your life forever. Make sure to tune in and visit momentswithmarianne.com for more information.